The storm clouds gathered heavily over the Scottish Highlands as Clara and her new husband Henry arrived at a small stone inn by the river. The timber creaked when the wind howled through the eaves, and the fire inside the parlour seemed the only light against the encroaching dark. They were to meet Henry's closest friends, Edward and Amelia, before beginning their adventure of whitewater rafting along the rapids the following morning. Clara, still adjusting to married life, felt a strange unease she could not name. The innkeeper's daughter, a pale little girl with wide blue eyes, stood silently by the door, watching Clara with unnerving stillness. When Henry disappeared to fetch the luggage, the child stepped closer. Her voice was no more than a breath. "They want to drown you," she whispered. Clara froze. The girl's gaze did not waver, her words slicing through the crackle of the fire. Then she darted away into the shadows before Clara could question her. Henry returned, cheerful and oblivious, carrying the bags as though nothing were amiss. Clara forced a smile, but the girl's warning echoed inside her mind. Her heart beat fast, and she wondered if this child's strange words were the trick of imagination, or the shadow of something far darker. The door opened, and Edward and Amelia stepped in, their faces glowing with laughter and familiarity. To Henry, it was the warmth of friendship. To Clara, it was the mask of strangers. And yet, as she glanced once more at the corner where the girl had stood, she saw nothing but emptiness. Still, her words lingered. "They want to drown you." The following morning, mist clung thickly over the riverbanks, veiling the highlands in a shroud of pale grey. Clara rose early, unable to shake the words of the little girl. As she stood by the window, the water below churned, swollen with rain from the night before. It looked less like an invitation to adventure, and more like a trap waiting to be sprung. Henry was in high spirits, his laughter booming through the corridor as he and Edward prepared the gear. Amelia joined Clara at the breakfast table, her smile perfectly polite yet strangely cold, as though measured rather than genuine. "You will love the rapids," Amelia said, buttering her toast with deliberate care. "The water is dangerous, yes, but only if you panic." The words slithered into Clara's chest, making her grip her teacup tightly. She wanted to ask Amelia directly what she meant, but Henry entered, cheerful and insistent, cutting short the moment. They set out together, boots crunching on the gravel path as they carried the raft down towards the river. The mist curled around them, muffling every sound except the constant rush of water. Clara hung back slightly, her gaze sweeping the landscape. The river's roar grew louder with every step, and her heart thudded harder with it. She caught a glance exchanged between Edward and Henry, subtle, but sharp. It was the kind of look that carried weight, a silent understanding hidden from her. When they reached the bank, Edward bent low to secure the raft. Clara noticed something odd. One of the life jackets, set aside for her, had a strap that appeared frayed, as though deliberately cut. Her breath caught in her throat. Before she could speak, Henry turned to her with a grin. "Are you ready, my love?" he asked. And behind his smile, Clara thought she saw it, the flicker of something colder, darker. The raft slid into the current with a hollow splash, rocking beneath their feet. Clara gripped the paddle, her fingers stiff against the polished wood, as the water pulled them forward. Mist clung low over the river, wrapping them in a veil that made the world beyond the banks vanish. Henry sat opposite her, his eyes bright with exhilaration. Edward barked instructions, steering from the rear while Amelia laughed, her voice oddly sharp against the rush of water. Clara forced herself to match their rhythm, though her arms trembled with unease. The first stretch was deceptively calm. The raft glided smoothly, the water whispering against its sides. But the roar ahead grew louder, promising violence. Clara's gaze dropped to her life jacket. The frayed strap scratched against her skin each time she moved, a constant reminder that safety was no guarantee. As the rapids surged into view, Edward shouted, "Hold steady!" The raft plunged into the torrent. Water crashed over them, drenching their clothes, filling Clara's mouth with the bitter taste of the river. She paddled hard, every muscle screaming, her heart pounding with panic. Then it happened. A sudden lurch threw her sideways. Her paddle slipped, her hand scrabbling against the slick rim of the raft. She felt the current tearing at her body, desperate to drag her under. Henry's hand shot out, not to pull her back, but to press against her shoulder, forcing her balance further off. For the briefest second, their eyes met, and Clara knew. The warning had been true. The river swallowed her scream as she fell. The river was ice against Clara's skin as she plunged beneath. The roar of the current thundered in her ears, churning her into darkness. She kicked desperately, fighting to rise, but the weight of the water dragged her down. Her lungs screamed for air. In the blur above, she glimpsed the raft cutting forward without pause. No hand reached out, no voice called her name. She was alone. Her fingers brushed against something sharp. A jagged rock tore at her sleeve, anchoring her long enough for her to push upward with all her strength. She broke the surface, gasping, her chest heaving as she clawed at the swirling foam. "Clara!" Amelia's voice rang out then, high and clear. But it was not a cry of worry. It was laughter, carried cruelly over the water. Clara's stomach twisted. Her suspicion hardened into certainty. This was no accident. They had wanted her to fall. They wanted her gone. The current hurled her toward the far bank, where thick branches reached out over the torrent. With every ounce of strength left in her, Clara grasped at one, her nails tearing against the bark as the river tried to wrench her away. She clung on, coughing violently, while her body shook from cold and fear. The raft drifted farther downstream. She could just make out Henry, standing tall with his paddle, his head turning, not to search for her, but to ensure she was gone. Clara pressed herself against the mud of the bank, her breath shallow, her heart furious. They thought the river had claimed her. But she was still alive. And she would find out why. Clara staggered from the riverbank into the woods, her dress clinging wet against her skin. Every step sank into mud, every breath tore at her throat. The trees loomed tall and dark, their branches dripping with rain, whispering as though the forest itself carried secrets. She pressed her back against a trunk, forcing herself to think. Henry. Edward. Amelia. They had not even tried to save her. The child at the inn had warned her. And now, Clara finally knew the truth. Her husband was not her protector. He was her executioner. A crack in the undergrowth jolted her. She crouched low, heart racing. Voices drifted through the mist. Familiar voices. "She will have been taken by the current," Edward muttered, his tone laced with satisfaction. "She was never strong enough for the water," Amelia replied, almost mocking. Clara's blood ran cold. They were near. Searching, not for her survival, but for her body. She crawled deeper into the shadows, twigs snapping beneath her trembling hands. She dared not breathe as their footsteps drew closer. Henry's voice rose above the others, calm and decisive. "No one will question it. A tragic accident. Nothing more." Clara bit down on her fear. The trees closed around her, shielding her from sight, but every syllable etched itself into her mind. Their plot was real. Their betrayal complete. And still, a darker question gnawed at her. Why? Her fingers brushed against something half buried in the soil. A torn piece of paper, damp and frayed. On it, faint ink still clung, numbers, names, and a single word scrawled in haste: inheritance. Clara's breath caught. The truth was bigger than she had imagined. Clara crouched low among the roots, clutching the sodden scrap of paper. Inheritance. The word blazed in her mind like fire. Was this what they wanted? Was her life the price of something she had yet to uncover? The voices drew closer. Henry's tone was firm, carrying through the trees. "We cannot risk hesitation. If anyone asks, we say she slipped. By the time they drag the river, she will be far from here. Clara's fingers dug into the mud. Each syllable twisted her heart tighter. She had loved him, trusted him, and now he spoke of her as though she were nothing but a nuisance to be erased. Then Edward spoke, lower but urgent. And if someone questions why she was here at all? If they ask about the will? Clara froze. The will? Henry's reply was swift, cold. Then we remind them of the accident that took her parents. No one knows the full details, only that she is their heir. And once she is gone, it passes, to me. The forest seemed to tilt. Clara pressed her hand to her mouth to keep from crying out. All along, the marriage had been a trap, carefully woven with charm and promises. She was never a wife in his eyes. She was a doorway, to money, land, and power. A twig cracked beneath her knee. The sound snapped like a pistol shot in the silence. Amelia's voice cut sharp. Did you hear that? Footsteps quickened. Branches snapped. The search turned toward her hiding place. Clara's pulse thundered. The paper shook in her grip. She backed away, slipping through the undergrowth, when suddenly a hand shot from the shadows, clamping over her wrist. She gasped, until she saw not Henry, nor Edward, nor Amelia, but the wide, frightened eyes of the little girl from the inn. Clara's breath caught as the girl pulled her deeper into the trees. Her small hand was ice-cold, yet her grip unyielding. They darted between trunks and brambles until the voices behind faded into the distance. Only then did the girl release her. Why are you here? Clara whispered, trembling. The child's eyes, wide and glistening in the dim light, held a sorrow far beyond her years. I told you not to trust him, she said softly. I told you he wanted you gone. Clara crouched, her heart hammering. How do you know this? Who are you? The girl lowered her gaze, fiddling with the hem of her worn dress. I live here. In the inn. My mother works for them. Henry, Edward, and Amelia. I heard things. Things I shouldn't have. Her voice broke, barely more than a breath. They planned it for months. The river. The marriage. All of it. Clara's chest tightened. The paper crumpled in her hand, the word inheritance glaring back at her like a curse. Then it is true. The will. My parents. The girl nodded quickly. Your family's land. The estates. Once you are gone, he takes it. That's what they said. Clara swayed, the weight of betrayal nearly crushing her. She had married Henry believing in love, yet behind his smile had lurked nothing but greed. Suddenly the girl grabbed her arm again. We must move. If they find us, they won't let either of us live. Clara stared at her, the enormity of it pressing down. This child was not merely a witness. She was a target too. The wind shifted, carrying faint shouts through the woods. The hunt had not ended. It had only grown closer. Clara rose to her feet, clutching the girl's hand. Fear coursed through her veins, but so did something else, resolve. If Henry believed she had drowned, then she would use that lie. She would turn it against him. And when the time came, he would see she was not so easily erased. The forest was thick with fog, curling low across the ground like pale smoke. Clara held tightly to the girl's hand as they moved swiftly between the trees, their footsteps muffled by wet earth. Every few moments, Clara glanced back, half expecting Henry's tall figure to emerge from the mist. The child whispered, "This way," and led her towards a narrow deer path winding deeper into the woods. But the air was sharp with sound, men's voices, carried on the wind. "Search the ridge." Edward's shout echoed. "Check the stream." Amelia's voice followed, shrill with urgency. Clara ducked low, heart pounding. The enemy was closing in. She pressed the girl against a tree, listening. Then, suddenly, Henry's voice drifted through the fog, calm and commanding. Spread out. She is weak. She cannot have gone far. His certainty was a knife in her chest. He knew her too well, even her limits. Clara tightened her grip on the scrap of paper. Inheritance. That single word gave her strength. They believed her powerless, but knowledge was a weapon too. If she could survive this night, she could expose them all. The girl tugged at her sleeve. There's a hut nearby. My mother sometimes takes me there to hide. It's old, but safe. Clara hesitated. Safe was a dangerous word, yet the child's eyes burned with sincerity. She nodded. They slipped deeper into the wood, branches scratching at their faces. Behind them, the fog swallowed every sound, until a snap shattered the silence. A footstep. Heavy. Measured. Close. Clara froze, her breath catching in her throat. Through the curtain of mist, she glimpsed a shadow moving, taller than the trees seemed to allow. Henry. He was hunting her himself. The hut loomed through the mist, its roof sagging, its timbers blackened with age. Clara and the child stumbled inside, slamming the crooked door shut. The air smelled of damp wood and ash, as though the place had not seen a fire in years. Clara pressed her back against the wall, trying to quiet her breath. The child whispered, "They will come. He always finds what he wants." A shiver traced Clara's spine. She had only one chance left, not to fight Henry with strength, but with truth. She unfolded the sodden scrap of paper, reading again the word that had sealed her fate, inheritance. The sound of boots crushing twigs outside made her heart jolt. A hand rattled the door. Henry's voice drifted in, steady and coaxing. "Clara. Enough of this. You cannot hide. Come back, and no one else will be hurt." Clara's eyes burned with fury. "You mean the way you killed my parents?" she shouted through the wood. Silence answered, sharp and telling. At last, his voice returned, lower, darker. "They were weak. Just as you are." The child whimpered, clutching Clara's skirt. Clara bent low, whispering in her ear. "When I open the door, run. Do not look back." The girl shook her head, terrified. But Clara's gaze was unyielding. "Run." The latch broke. Henry stepped inside, tall and shadowed, his eyes glinting with cold resolve. "You were meant to drown," he said. "It would have been kinder." Clara straightened, meeting his gaze. "No, Henry. It would have been easier. For you." As he advanced, Clara hurled the paper into the hearth, its edges flaring in sudden flame. Henry froze, fury flashing across his face. "What have you done?" "Exposed you," Clara whispered. "Even ash tells a story." And she, Clara pushed the child toward the open crack of the door, "will tell the world." The girl bolted into the fog, her footsteps fading fast. Henry lunged, but Clara stood her ground. The hut groaned as if holding its breath, the firelight casting monstrous shadows. "You cannot win," Henry spat. But Clara's eyes were still. "I already have. You lost me the moment you believed I was powerless." With a roar, Henry struck, but the rotting floorboards gave way beneath his weight. He plunged through with a cry, swallowed by darkness and splintered wood. Clara staggered back, chest heaving, watching as silence claimed the hut once more. She did not move until the flames from the hearth began to creep along the beams. Then, with trembling legs, she stepped into the fog, leaving the ruins, and Henry, behind. Outside, the child waited for her at the tree line, tears shining on her cheeks. Clara took her hand. The forest was still dangerous, but Clara no longer felt hunted. She felt alive. And though Henry's voice might haunt her dreams forever, she knew this truth: the river had not claimed her. Nor had his lies. She had survived. And survival was the first step toward justice.